Hey everybody. You could probably hear her banging her cup around, but hey, that's just that's just what it is, I guess. But anyways, today is the second part 2 of the Dyatlov Pass mystery. And Stacy Galloway is on here again to walk us through it. She also has a book called The Death of Nine, the Dyatlov Pass Mystery, and the link's in the description of the video. I don't know why my screen's blinking in and out, but are you guys all there? Hey, thanks, Angie Hart. Very cool, very cool. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm just going to open up well, why don't you do a recap of last week and then lead into what we're doing now after I turn down the music.
All right. Hi, everybody. The last episode, we talked about the hikers themselves, their experience that combined, they had more than 50 years hiking experience. They'd all been on strenuous hikes before. This hike would involve them carrying everything on their backs and moving on skis through snow in the Ural Mountains. It was scheduled to be a few weeks long. It was sponsored through a university, the UPI University. And most of them were part of a hiking club within that university. A few of them had graduated after being part of that hiking club. And Simon, the oldest, was applying for a job at the university, and he joined, kind of a last minute member. He's the one that nobody knew beforehand, but they really fell into easy friendship with him as they met to talk about the hike. There were 10 members originally, with Yuri Yudin not able to complete the hike due to his nerve condition. And I did bring up that nerve condition a few times last time. I'd like to tell you it was sciatica, and it was a known condition with him. And he did turn back right before the group set off in the wilderness. He didn't want to hold them back. He gave them his supplies, extra clothes, the food, things he was carrying. So he, as the 10th person, he didn't actually, like I said, didn't actually finish or go on the hike. He, along with everybody else, doesn't know what happened, but he's been a very valuable source of information about the cohesion of the group. Like I just said, with having the person in there that they didn't really know, he could give a lot of insight into the camaraderie, how they all interacted with each other, how they were prepared for the hike, and things like that. In the earlier show, we talked about the towns they visited as they progressed into the wilderness. They did stay in a few towns. They took a train, a truck ride. They rode a sleigh. They stayed at a logging town. They stayed in an abandoned mining town. And that was their last encounter with a house, something with a roof over them before they set off to be camping in their tents. With those towns, we did talk about one called Vijay. It's actually also referred to as Vizhay on Google Maps, and Gray's been wonderful to find that.
Well, it was actually Kyron found it to me for me.
Oh yeah, Kyron. And thank you, Kyron. That's wonderful. And by the time I researched it and let Gray know, he said, Kyron was on it right away. So there's some folks with some amazing knowledge out there. And thank you again for that. One thing I kind of want to go over a few things I did mention, and one thing I did not is in that town of Vizhay, in even a town before that, the group interacted with school children and the townspeople and stuff like that. In Vizhay itself, they did talk to some of the villagers, and Yuri Yudin passed on a story where Igor spoke to a hunter whose last name was Rempel in that town. Now, Yuri says it was a very animated conversation. It didn't look like they were arguing as much as just exchanging a lot of information. He's not privy. He didn't think to really ask about the details. There's some rumors that Igor did tell Yuri and the group that they would be delayed due to some of the information he found out from Rempel. I wasn't able to verify that. So I'm really cautious about that. I'm trying to pass on all verifiable details, but I do want to mention that that conversation is something that Yuri Yudin did bring up, along with several other things. We'll talk about those more as we get to the tent and the storage site and the discovery of those things. So we ended the last show with a few of the very last photos that showed up on some of the rolls of film that were in the cameras. And the last entry in the diary, the group diary, was written by Igor, and he was talking about that they would, yeah, and it lined up with what we're seeing on the screen right now, that they were in a, kind of more out of the trees, in a more open area. It was getting cold, or colder, I'm sorry, it was already cold, getting colder. And he ends with saying that the next day they'll build a storage site and continue on with their hike. And that's the last entry ever from them. This photo right here was a last picture on one of the rolls of film that were later developed. And there's a few other pictures, kind of that weird light one, and
yeah, we know that's we know it's a Sasquatch. It's just which species is it? Okay, that's
right.
That's all we're looking for.
And is he wearing clothes? I mean, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of a creep. That is like one of the most creepy pictures you could ever imagine, especially when you realize what happened to everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, it has a real ominous feel to it. Yeah, that one really does. And that was the last roll. In fact, this is probably a good time for me to bring up the cameras. I'll mention this again, but I do want to say that when the searchers found the tent, they did find cameras and rolls of film, food, skis, everything like that, and we'll go into those details in a minute. The cameras themselves were used by the searchers during the rest of the search. They actually used the hikers' cameras, took pictures of the bodies when they found them, took pictures of the search looking for the bodies, and other things like that. So they also used the skis and ski poles and food that they found at the tent. But I did want to bring up that very different than what you'd see nowadays with an investigation. We certainly wouldn't see the investigators using people's cameras, but back then they were in austere conditions and they used what was there. And cameras were, a lot more expensive and rare, so they're a little harder to come by. So with the search itself, the group was due back on February 12th. They didn't show up, and nobody was really too concerned at the moment. Several groups had been delayed due to weather in past years. Some of the other hiking groups that were within, let's say, 10 or 15 miles of this group reported that weather had worsened, which we saw in that photo Gray had up a little bit ago. It looked like it was getting snowy and cold, and they were possibly delayed. And that was February 12th. Well, February 17th, Luda and Alexander's families called the university itself and said, hey, it's the 17th, what's going on? Have you heard anything? The university said, no, it's fine. They were probably delayed due to weather. So on February 20th, Luda and Alexander's families called the city council of the Sverdlovsk city committee and demanded answers. The city committee got with the university and they held an emergency meeting. They decided to start a search party, and the search party was mainly the university students, instructors. They threw in a few experienced winter outdoorsmen. There were really no formalized, organized search parties back then. It was more volunteer, who's around, who can do this. So even some of the students that were just returning from these hikes turned around and went right back out there. So the 21st through the 24th and 25th, At first, they flew a plane around looking to see if there was any sign or maybe an SOS from the group. Nothing. On the 23rd of February, they decided to have a helicopter start dropping off search parties in different parts of the area where the Dyatlov group was believed to have been. And those search parties started finding ski tracks and following them to see if they could find the group. So the 24th and 25th, they did that. On February 26th, a winter storm was approaching, but late in the afternoon, one of the search groups came upon the Dyatlov group's campsite. The tent was collapsed, but visible. The back entrance was covered with a few inches of snow. The front entrance was halfway open. There was a flashlight laying on top of the tent. It had a slight dusting of snow on it. The flashlight was not turned on. It was in the off position, but when the searchers handled it and turned it on, so the batteries worked. Igor's coat was outside the tent, and there were also several socks, hats, loose change, compasses, small objects were scattered all around the tent. 50 feet away from the tent were several sets of footprints that were leading away from the tent.
Yeah, let's see. So what about this image right here? What are we seeing? Are these
those are footprints.
And what's this dark stuff back here? Is that just a?
I think that's just either an artifact from the picture or somebody added that.
Oh, I see. Okay. So these are footprints back in the snow that they made, though, right? The group. Yes.
These footprints were like I said, they first found some of them about 50 feet away from the tent, and they were. There's a few other pictures we have of the footprints, but they aren't really orderly. They also weren't. What am I trying to say? Continuous. Due to the wind and the snow, some footprints were still visible due to the conditions of the mountain, while others had been blown away by wind and snow and stuff like that. There's no pictures existing that show the continual line of the footprints, so all we have are bits and pieces showing a few here, a few there. The searchers did say that they appeared that they had walked like maybe in a line with their arms linked further down the slope. They did lose sight of the footprints as they got into the tree line that was further down the slope of the mountain. This one right here is a picture of the footprints, and it has kind of an odd perspective to it, but what it is these footprints are raised up. Because the footprint, and the searchers noted that several of them looked like they were in bare feet. In fact, most of them looked like they were either in socks or bare feet. There were a few boot footprints mixed up with this. But what we're seeing here with the raised columns is the warmth of their feet melted the snow just a little bit, and then it refroze right away. And then when the wind blew like those other footprints away and stuff, these little melted parts made columns. So they're kind of sticking up a little bit. And
it's like it made ice, and then it melted and then sort of made a firmer spot where the rest of it are just loose snowflakes like powder. And they got blown away, but it left the footprints there. Huh.
Exactly. And so there's some, some little drag marks and stuff. What I did here is I did see this on another site, and I thought it was really a good idea. They colored in where the footprints were to kind of give you an idea of the little weird little marks, the little drag marks. There's a handprint that's on this picture, kind of up in near the right hand. I have it. Yes, I have it right where your
right
pointer
there.
is. Yeah, kind of a handprint. Various stages. They said the searchers said more than once, and more than one searcher, that these were bare feet, either bare feet or in socks.
Wow, that hand one looks really.
Yeah, the hand one's really right there.
Cool.
And then you see these odd. Kind of little drag marks.
Well, you know me, when I look at that, it looks like a hand, but maybe it's pareidolia, right? Like, who knows for sure?
Right. Right.
You know, it's just these you can tell are footprints, and I would actually think that it's right in here where the toes. That's what I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And
The kind of
then,
the barefoot.
but they're thinking, yeah, because it sort of looks like almost like a cast of a foot that you might get in mud
Right.
when you put plaster
Right.
in it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So these, as I mentioned, we don't have any pictures of the continual sets of tracks. We have the descriptions from the searchers themselves, and even those aren't all the same. They say, one says, 8 or 9 sets that were in an orderly fashion, kind of moving down the slope, almost like they were walking with their arms linked or shoulder to shoulder, with one set veering off at one time and then coming back. Another searcher says fairly close to the same thing, except he says that 2 sets veered off and came back. But they basically were in agreement that the the footprints did disappear as they got into the tree line, which, different weather conditions, not different weather conditions, but weather patterns, the wind and things like that would affect them different. Snow would fall on them and cover them up much easier. So the footprints really now present an unusual, one of those other unusual clues. It looks a bit chaotic, and when you think about it, with the things scattered around the tent, some clothes, some small change, there was a pickaxe found outside the tent, Igor's coat, his shirt, some slippers, the sheath of a knife, several just odd and unusual things that are just part of, one of those questions, what happened? So the tent itself, they found, the searchers, it was frozen to the ground in this collapsed form. The searchers took the pickaxe that was outside the tent and hacked a hole in the tent on the top of it, and then peeled it off and found, to their relief, there were no bodies in there. They did find what they considered to be a fairly orderly tent, that a pile of coats in one corner, a pile of shoes in another. Food was out. There were several items out that looked like there had been a meal happening. The stove was in there, but didn't have any wood in it that had been burned. There were 1 or 2 pieces of wood found in the tent. Items that would have been were more delicate, crackers and bread and even a cup of cocoa. Items like that were still intact. They were frozen, but they were intact. They weren't crushed. The searchers, one of the first things that they and the experienced outdoorsmen that did find the tent set or noted was there was no sign of a natural event. There was no sign that an ice slab had come down the mountain. There was no sign that an avalanche. There was no sign of a stampede of animals or anything like that. They found the footprints that still remained 50 feet from the tent, and the tent itself collapsed. They did note the slashes in the tent, but they thought, when we find our friends, we'll find out what happened. So they had hope. They thought, that we're going to find these guys. They left. Maybe they left to somebody got hurt and they walked them down the mountain.
Let me ask you something. Are you saying that the stove appears not to have even been used that night?
Yeah. Yes. There's quite a bit of dialogue that happens with arguments, even whether the stove was even connected to the top of the tent or not, whether it was even put together or not. And the best I could address with that was the piece of information that one of the searchers said there was wood in the tent, but it was not burnt. It looked like it was kindling being prepared to be used in the stove for heat for that night.
Yeah, it looked like they were, based on last week's or part 1, that it was just so frantic putting everything up. I mean, I'm surprised they were even able to get a tent working.
Right.
In those conditions.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it just looked like they were dealing with a lot with that. The tent, hung the they so they found the tent. They found all the money still, their passports, their train tickets, and that gave them hope also. Hey, no criminals broke in and did something to them. I mean, they wouldn't have left this money behind. So the searchers, especially their friends, while they took all that as a good sign. They removed the group diary, the cameras, the flask of vodka, and
No, not the vodka. Come on.
I know, right? And then the metal box with the money and the passports, and took it all to their main camp and celebrated. They drank the vodka and celebrated that they were going to find their friends, and nobody was dead in the tent. And the tent just looked like they left for some reason. Maybe somebody got hurt.
Yeah, and here's something that you guys always see what I do. I was looking at this picture, and then I knew this is where the tent is, and then I've seen the map that Stacy gave me where the tent was, so I was looking at it. And if you go back to 2003, there's a really good satellite imagery of the mountain, and then I went right down here like this. Check this out. Watch this. It's crazy. Okay, so now look at this right here. Here's the tree line. Notice that little point, and then this mountain right here. Watch this. Here we go. Let me get the right shot. Where did that go? There it is. Look at this. It's right there. I mean, that's
Look at that.
I mean, that's like exactly the same.
That is amazing. That's awesome.
I mean, you look at that and you go, wow, that's accurate then. I mean,
it is. And it just brings it to life. I mean, here we are, looking at a satellite image and looking at it, that old photo.
Yeah. And
it just tells you
everything. I mean, you look at this even. Like, see that little white area right there? It's right there. See? I mean, it's crazy. It must be a little meadow or something right there in that little spot.
Wow.
But, yeah, it's just amazing.
That's awesome. You did great with that.
Well,
you did. That's fantastic.
Well, thanks. I thought it was just so cool that it matched up perfectly with one of your
that is awesome. That's awesome. So the search party, they're happy. The storm's coming in. They leave for the night. The next day, more officials come in. They see and all the backpacks are in there too, all 9 backpacks. So they take the tent down, dump all the backpacks out, and put everything in one big heaping pile, and fold it all up and stick it in a plane. They send it to Ivdel, which is where Ural was, and asked him, said, hey, can you identify all this stuff? So Ural went through piece by piece to try to say, hey, this is so-and-so's sweater, this is so-and-so's shoes, this is so-and-so's, I mean, it was just
so this is right when this image right here is right when they got there. It would look like this, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of strange, this big thick chunk of snow on top of it.
Right.
I mean, it like if it was just snow, well, I guess it was a while though, right? They didn't make it there for how long was it after they went missing until they showed up there?
Until they were found.
Yeah, found.
The last entry was January 31st, and they were found February. Let me make sure I've got this right before I do that. 27th, I believe, is what.
So almost a month, but it still seems like just an awful lot of. It's almost like it collapsed first, and then maybe this is snow that built up over time. I don't know. It doesn't look smooth like regular snow,
It doesn't. And now what we're looking at on the tent itself is the front entrance, right there. Yeah. And you can kind of see the snow built up a little bit too. So maybe the way it drifted, the way the wind, drifted over it and stuff like that. And they. Well, this is the second day. This is the officials. So the searchers themselves were there the day prior. There's not really a picture of that, but they took that pickaxe and hit the top of the tent and then peeled the canvas off.
So is this the pile you were talking about?
It's the pile.
And then in that other shot that you have, well, I think it was back a couple. Let's see. It was like this is the tent after they've moved it away, right?
Right.
Because it was over here,
and then the pile.
Right? Or did they? Or is this where the tent was, and then they moved the pile over there?
I can't say for sure, but on the right, it does look like that's the tent, and then all the pile of stuff is on the left there.
Yeah, and it looks like this might be where the tent was, and that's why they're all looking around in that area.
And the skis, and yeah.
Because it looks like they're even digging over here or something, looking.
They did start right away with kind of digging, and like I said, they found all those little items. They started using the ski poles to kind of jam down in the snow and the deeper parts of the snow to see if they could find maybe somebody. But they did find several small items around that area, clothing, and like I said, a knife, or the sheath of a knife, and small coins and stuff like that. In the last entry of that diary, like I said, the searchers took or the group diary with them. They read that the Dyatlov group was going to set up a storage site. Now, what a storage site would be is something where they wanted to ascend like the slope of that mountain they were on. So instead of dragging things with them or leaving it loose in the tent, they would dig a site, or perhaps build a site up. In this case, they dug a hole and stash extra things in there. So some searchers went out looking for this site when they saw that annotated in in the group diary, and they went off looking for the storage site, and they found it about 3 blocks away, a third of a mile away from the tent. It was marked with a set of skis, and according to the searchers, it looked like it hadn't been disturbed. So one of their theories was, somebody was hurt. Maybe they headed off to their storage site to find more supplies or to set up camp there or something like that. But according to the folks that found it, they said it really just looked like it hadn't been disturbed.
Yeah. What we were having a problem trying to figure out exactly where the storage site is located, though, because there's trees. Those pictures we were just looking at, right here. This is where the storage site is, right, in this area.
Yes,
and
it's
right here, and this is where they actually found the storage site, and that looks like you're in trees. However, when you go out to the satellite imagery, and then you go a third of a mile, do you have the specific direction?
I had a third of a mile southwest of the tent, but like Ray was saying, we don't know what direction from the tent. It says southwest of the tent. Do they mean true, like put the tent north and do a true southwest, or southwest from the entrance? So we were trying to figure that out.
So that would be right there, and then when you look at it, there aren't any trees there. So
no,
that doesn't look like. I just wonder if those directions aren't really that great. Here's one thing. How about right there? Maybe they
that looks.
That looks like it could be right there, doesn't it? Right in that spot, and that's the same distance. Let's just do a third of. Let's see if there's anything that's a third of a mile away. Okay, like that's a third right there. You're getting right at the edge of the trees right there. But it looks more dense than right there, doesn't it?
Yes.
So I don't really know. Maybe they just gave bad directions or something.
I'm gonna I'll send you some of those old maps. There are many, and I said this in the first episode. You could write a book about almost every topic of this, even the maps themselves, the route, what direction they went, what their goal was, what they were going to do the next day. So there's several maps, and I can send you the ones that are out there, and I'm sure that will help a lot. That'd
be cool to get that dialed in.
With that, especially with those trees and stuff like that. And they would have done it, they wouldn't have gone to the tent and then backtracked. They would have built the storage site and then continued to, making forward progress. So they're not going to find the tent site, especially in that weather we saw them in, and then say, hey, let's, walk way over here. They're going to do it in order. Like, let's do the storage site. Okay, now let's build the tent, make a little more progress and build the tent.
Was it a storage site that they were going to come back to while heading back home, or was it a storage site like a little ahead of where they were? That's what I'm trying to figure out. What do they need the storage site for? What are they doing with it? I know you explained it, but I'm still...
Right.
better.
I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and that would be a good thing to dig into. I assumed that it was something they built as they progressed, but it makes sense too that they would say, "Hey, let's, stick it out here, and then when we walk back out that way, we can stop."
Yeah, like we're
And
gonna
that's
go
probably
like
addressed.
yeah, like we're gonna go back out this way anyways. Why don't we build a
Just do
storage site
this.
and put a bunch of stuff here because we only need this amount to get to where we're going, and on the way
Right.
back we don't have to carry all of it the whole way. Why would we do that?
Back and forth. Yeah,
Right,
back and
right.
forth. Yeah, that's a good question. I'll look into that. We'll probably know that by the time we do the next show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then
I'll
that would
definitely think
explain
that.
where it was. Because I doubt they did like scouting missions to go a half mile forward on their journey to make a storage. I don't know what you call it, a storage hole or whatever.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, they say storage site, and a lot of
Site.
times they kind of show pictures of more of a platform, almost a building where you'd have to spend a day or two constructing it. And in this case, it was something they obviously did quickly to move things along, get rid of some of their extra things.
Because you were
The
saying
man-
they were headed up here. That's where you were saying they headed.
Yes. Hmm.
So if they were heading up there, was that just sort of going to be a day thing? And then were they going somewhere after they got up here? Were they going to go somewhere else?
Their destination was Mount Torton or Torton. I'm not saying that right. Would be their next destination.
Okay, maybe we'll get that at some point too.
Let me get that.
How do you
spelling
spell
because
that?
we did mention that before.
Mount.
Yeah, let me find that. Okay, so Otorten.
O-T. O-T.
Otorten.
O-T.
Is that, there's a lot of O's and stuff.
Yeah, say it again. O-T-O-R and then
Ten,
T-E-N.
like the number 10.
Oh. Oh, wait, that says Gora Orton. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. So that was that was a destination on their route.
Well, they weren't even close. They had a long ways to go, really.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll put a little pin there so I don't have to do it again.
They were on what's called Mount Kola, and yes, they would have gone up to that peak, and then so the storage site. Yeah, that's an interesting question. We'll know that answer with the next show.
Yeah, well, you'd think that the storage site, if they were going to do something like that, would be maybe down in this area or right here, because this one, it would have been easier to get to when you were down low, and then it's on the way to the Gora Torton.
Torton.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll see if we can get that one figured out.
Yeah. That's an awesome question. I jot things down even as we, from the last one too. So, yeah, definitely things that we can chat about with the next one.
I want to see how many miles that is really quick. Let's see. Yeah, it's only 7 miles, so it looks a lot further, but it's not that far, I guess. I mean, 7 miles in a blizzard and snow is a long way. So
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, kind of those up and down, and
Right.
trying to find a way through the valleys rather than the peaks and everything.
All right, so I guess we're now. That's. Do you have more to say about the searchers?
Well, they found the footprint. Okay, we talked about the footprints. We'll talk a little bit more about the tent itself. I want to mention, since we were talking about the storage site, that it was marked with a set of skis. It did look like it hadn't been visited again, that it was undisturbed. And it kind of brings up it does bring up the question, whose skis were left at that storage site? Now, they were a group of 9. They didn't have extra skis, extra ski poles, any extra equipment like that. Yet somebody left their skis there to mark it. And then would have walked in the snow to the tent from the storage site.
And then knowing that they were going to come back that direction the next day to get the skis. That's why that other location made more sense that I was showing, where it was sort of on the way to the next spot.
The next stop.
Because they were just going to. They were just going to do they were just going to do like a day trip to the top of that mountain or something. Right?
What I read was it would be a 3-day. They were planning on a 3-day thing before they returned to the storage site.
Huh. So they're going to come up here and then go that way? That's weird. So were they just going to be walking along this ridge or something all the way around like that?
Maybe go to that.
Well, it's interesting. There's this path on
and then
there.
Back.
Yeah, it's weird because there's actually some purple line here that I don't know what it is that Google Earth has in there, and it almost matches exactly what. Look at this from the top of this mountain. It goes around on these other ridges. You can see they're all kind of high, and then it ends up right at Gora or Otorten.
This is the Dyatlov Pass area has become quite an area for people to visit. This may be something that's marked as a route with folks who follow the proposed route, what would have been the route, and kind of following the route up to that point. That's just a guess. I'm not sure. I'd have to research that, but that may be what that means.
Huh. Yeah. It's really interesting because it's strange. They came from this town over here in this direction, and then for some reason they go past this mountain and they end up, they're sort of, well, I guess we don't know that. That's where you end up finding them later.
Right. That's where their bodies are. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The tent itself, was built on that mountain slope. And that's one of those subjects too that has a lot of debate around it. Why would Igor have chosen to build it there? Why not down further in the trees? And then others say, well, they were making progress. He probably just didn't want to go back into the trees. They'd made it that far, brave one night out in the cold, and keep going. So there's a lot of conversation that happens about why that tent was there instead of just it's like a half mile down to that tree line.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was just so weird that there's this tent way out in the open elements and they're digging in there really quick. It's almost like they tried to go to that top of that mountain that day, and then they go, whoa, this is too much, and just started digging really quick or something. Right,
just to get out of whatever was coming in. Exactly. Yeah, that picture of them digging and stuff just looks like they're so cold, and I'm just trying to get that done. The search group did look at the top of that mountain to see if there was a pile of stones or some indication that the Dyatlov group had actually climbed it, and they didn't find anything. Nor were there footsteps or ski marks, I guess would be more appropriate. But again, with the wind and the, kind of blowing them around, we have the footprints from around the tent going down the slope. But the first search group didn't find any indication that they had progressed further from the tent.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know where that storage site was. It just sort of keeps nagging at me because it's
what direction it was, and that 1/3 southwest of the tent. Again, we don't know what orientation they're looking at the tent, to give that direction. So I will research that and find the maps that folks have developed. There's a lot of people that have a wealth of knowledge about this that have developed maps where they believe that storage site would actually be. And we'll certainly take a look at that.
All right. Well, I'm moving on I got it on to chapter 4 now.
We'll move on to the bodies themselves. To just run through the tent itself, I think we covered everything in the tent. There was just things were not crushed. Delicate items were not crushed. It looked orderly. So the searchers, on February 27th, a search group went out to find a camp area for the larger search parties. They thought, so they walked about a mile away from the tent. found what they thought was a great camp area near this cedar tree and found the bodies of George and Yuri. Now, this tree, what we're looking at is where the branches were cut off of this tree. That was one of the first things they noticed once they found the bodies, which are just almost right under this tree, are that the branches on this one side of the tree had been broken and cut off all the way up to about 15 feet. And some of the branches were still just, hanging on the tree, somewhere on the ground. And it's something where one of the searchers described it as, it's almost like somebody wanted to create a window in the tree. This part of the tree we're looking at is in a direct line of vision to the tent. So if you could see, if you stood outside the entrance to the tent and looked, you'd be looking at that side of the cedar tree, that bare side where the branches had been cut, making kind of a clearing in the tree itself.
So you're saying if you were at the tent looking at it, you'd see that? Can you say that again?
Well, you wouldn't be able to see it exactly, but the way it was described as that bare part of the cedar tree where the branches are broken and cut is the side that faces the tent.
Okay, so
somebody kind of cleared off that side.
It would be like that then, right?
Right.
But the bare side would be what we're looking at if that's where the tree is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And is there
not a lot of cedar trees out there? I mean, what made it? I mean, when they just say, "Hey, the cedar tree,"
the cedar tree area, there were other cedar trees, but it was a large tree, and it was kind of a prominent landmark, marking that clearing that the bodies were found in. So they tend to call that the cedar tree area. We have the tent area, the cedar tree area, the snow den area. So this is George and Yuri as they were discovered. We have George is laying on his back. That's him. And then Yuri is next to him lying on his stomach.
So this is a head right here, right?
Yes.
That's it's weird the way it looks like is probably opposite of what it is. This is his chin here though, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And then the eyes. And then, let me rotate that around just to. That's creepy. So that's his mouth right in that area ish. Yeah. Oops.
This area, when they found it, the searchers said that they're not really visible, but it looks like there had been many people in this area, like other footprints had been snowed in. There were still indents from footprints. Yuri and George were laying on some of the branches that had been cut from that big cedar tree. A campfire had been set in the area, and the log wasn't burned all the way through. One of the experienced outdoorsmen said it looked like it burned for maybe 90 minutes, but it was a good log. It should have continued to burn, and it didn't.
So does it seem like they, in a hurry, just cut down branches, tried to get off the snow, so that they weren't absolutely exposed to the snow, and then they tried to set some of it on fire, something like that? Or is this prior? I guess we don't really know for sure.
We don't know. No, what we're looking at now is just the items that were left behind: a partial campfire, a tree that has branches cut up to 15 feet up. And remember, these folks weren't dressed very well. Some of them were barefoot, walking about a mile to get to the cedar area, or as I've had a few readers say, maybe they were running, maybe it went faster. Well, in some parts they're going through snow, but absolutely it wouldn't have had to be an hour, but that's still a long time when you don't have anything on your feet to get to this area. There is a 15-foot cliff between the tent and this area that these two are found in. So now you're talking about walking a mile from the tent, climbing a 15-foot cliff ridge, rocky ridge, and then getting to this area. It seems like to get there for protection or to build some sort of shelter, they pass through quite a few areas that would have been just as well to.
Did they find any axes or hatchets or anything near right here? Like, how'd they get the branches off is what I'm trying to...
Exactly. They did find George's knife later after the snow melted. They found
a knife,
George's knife.
Those branches are so thick. I can't imagine a knife doing anything. It would take you 2 hours to even make a little notch in a branch like that.
Some suggested that perhaps they hung, climbed up and hung and used their body weight to break branches down.
Yeah, so they're not saying they're these nice cuts. They're just broken off branches.
It's in dispute. One searcher says they were cut. Another one says they were broken. In my book, I say both. But it's not clear whether they were all, clean cuts or broken.
So that next shot right here. So where is the other body? Is it right here?
He's right there.
Okay, covered with snow. And then is that right here?
Yes.
So they've wiped the little snow off in this case, right? Because I can't see any of these. Let's see.
They're laying side by side with both their heads in the same direction.
But it looks like they've cleared snow off or something.
Maybe they did. They didn't really explain, a picture by picture. What we have are kind of the roll of pictures that come off of the cameras that the Dyatlov group used to take their photos. So, yeah, they could have very well cleared it a little bit. Here they are cleared off, and we can see that their clothes have been cut off and torn.
And this is George and Yuri. And they're probably really close to that tree, though, right? Not how I have it.
Right. Yeah, that tree is. In fact, if we look at that, I think I indicate that in a further picture, how close they are to the tree. Yeah, that first picture that you showed of the body is kind of. The first one, it shows the tree.
Right
there it is.
Okay. Yeah, so they're just
and
right
another
under
thing.
it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, so they're just right under it. Yeah.
Right. The tree itself, I know we talked about the branches being broken off up to 15 feet up. The tree itself had blood on it. The searchers noted that the tree had blood around it. They didn't give any examples of what that would be, but maybe if somebody was tied up to it or something.
So let me move it to this one. Okay. Does he have gloves on, or is that just what his?
It's his frostbitten hands.
Okay.
Yeah, they're purple.
It's strange when you go to that first one. When you look at that, it's so dark that it looked like it was a glove right there, but apparently not. That's just so wild. I mean, you hear the paradoxical undressing when you're dying, but aren't almost how many of them are undressed? A little bit.
These two are the most undressed. Some of the others we'll see have light pants on. Like when I say light pants, I mean more like not lounging like pajamas, but more like regular pants they wouldn't hike in for warmth.
So it's almost like they just bailed out of the tent like this, though, right? Or would they sleep like this, though? I mean, I know, when people go to bed, they wear this kind of stuff, but when you're in the middle of blizzards, don't you still dress pretty?
Yes. What they would do is they would stay dressed. They would put on what they called felt boots or slippers, but still stay warm. A lot of times they'd take the sweaters they'd been wearing during the day and turn them inside out and wear them to help kind of dry them out a little bit at night, but still wear them at night. And then they would stick their hats and gloves in between their skin and their clothing layers. This is for nighttime sleeping now, to help dry those out because, they're hiking. I know we brought up how they were dressed and if they could stay warm, but they're exerting a lot of energy, on those skis and hiking through that snow and stuff like that. So they were probably sweating a little bit, plus getting wet from the snow itself and everything. So at night they would not be fully undressed. No, they would be in pants, shirts, sweaters, probably have their hats and gloves stuck in different parts between their clothing layers and their body. Put their clothes inside out.
So what isn't this?
Like
that's clothing that's ripped though, right there, right?
Yes, this is ripped and torn. In fact,
wow.
This is George, and as we'll see in the autopsies, which will be the next show, we'll go in depth on the autopsies. We don't see it here, but his leg is burned from ankle to thigh. He's got a huge bruise on his bottom. He's got a lot of injuries. We don't see them here.
Left leg? His left leg? This one? Or
yes.
is it this? Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Notice how that whole leg doesn't have any pant remaining, where this one does a little bit.
And Luda actually has his part of his pants on. They found the burned parts of those pants that she's wearing, and we'll find her later.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So basically with these two, and we'll talk about it some more in depth as we go through the autopsies themselves. We'll talk a lot about clothing and stuff, but again, we can talk about, we'll bring it up a few times. These two died early enough ahead of the others, and later we'll see that the others had to be near them at some point because their clothes have been cut off of them, which, working with bodies or people that are unresponsive, unfortunately, that's the easiest way to get clothes off. Tear them or cut them, get them off, and then are used, especially on Luda. Now, that's one thing that comes up a lot with this mystery is they trading off clothes. The only one wearing somebody else's clothes is Luda, and she's when they find her, she has a few, like her own sweater on, another sweater, but she doesn't have anything on her feet, and she's got George's outer pants kind of wrapped around one of her legs. And they know that it's his because it matches up with the burn, this huge 3rd-degree burn that he has all up and down his leg. And again, we'll go in depth in that later.
I wonder if that could have been part of the fire that went out after a while. That should have lasted longer that you mentioned. Because wasn't there a fire right here at this tree?
They actually, we look at there's a picture coming up where I indicate where the fire, okay, there's the log that only burned for 90 minutes and should have burned longer.
That's a huge log, right?
Yeah, it's pretty big.
That's a person right there, isn't it?
No, it's just a...
Wow, that's so weird. Look how, that looks just like that looks like a log that's probably 20 feet wide. Look at that. Looks like there's a guy there and an arm. My God!
It's all that perspective,
I just did
it?
the Kanika Jenkins thing. I actually looked like that was a face and a hair back there and an arm. That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, that's all the perspective. And in fact, that picture doesn't even really show. I mean, like you said, it looks huge.
Yeah. We
don't know, how big that log really is.
I almost have to get rid of this thing because it makes, no matter what, the log looks like it's 20 feet wide because it looks to me. I've got
like one of the redwood.
I just
trees.
got pareidolia just now. Yeah.
Oh gosh, and it's so easy to do with these pictures. I mean, that mystery man one, that one we keep saying is ominous. I mean, that's just I do that. See the details with things. So this is yes, that was an up close of the campfire. And as we continue with the pictures, there's a few more of the cedar area.
I'm trying to. It's not skipping forward. Let me just get rid of that and open up another one. Right here. No,
in this picture,
that's the log right there, right?
Yes.
Wow.
So in this picture, yeah,
so
we've got. I know it gives it. It's still big.
Well, it's a lot smaller now, though, compared to. It looked like a redwood tree a minute ago. Okay.
That helps give us perspective, doesn't it? So we've got the campfire area, as we saw. The right is that tall cedar tree. The bodies, this angle picture, the bodies are in front of the tree. So if they were still there, they'd be in the foreground, the tree itself right in there, yes. And a bit to the right of the tree. So kind of in, yes, right in there.
Right in there.
Yeah. Is where the bodies were. The campfire itself, now we talked about that one side of the cedar tree being kind of clear of branches. This campfire is on the opposite side. So if you were to look at the again, from the tent, if you could see this tree, you'd see the cleared off branches, and then on the other side of the tree is the campfire. So that's another thing that comes up in discussions, is maybe the campfire was used as a signal or something to the tent, or but the tree is blocking.
Is this still
that.
the tree? Is this a whole different thing now, or is that
That's the tree still.
the
So
same tree? Okay.
this is the side that faces the tent. So this is the side that's got the branches kind of cleared off a bit. The campfire's behind it. And then along in this area, they said for several feet, I want to say like 60 feet, are a lot of little trees have branches and their tops broken off, which doesn't make sense because those little green branches and stuff weren't going to be good for a fire. So it baffled the first searchers that found these bodies why the tops of so many trees around there and their branches would be broken or cut off. And there, right there, they did find with the bodies that dark spot off. Yep, that's an item of clothing. They found a shirt in that area. They found, again, some small items. They did find a knife later after the snow melted.
I was going to ask what that was. What's this right here on this branch?
That looks like somebody's ski pole, maybe marking the spot.
Yeah.
Of where they found these bodies.
Maybe that's what I was seeing on that log a minute ago from a weird angle. It made it look like it actually almost looks like a little forget it, like a character again, because I know it looks like a glove of some sort. But
it's hard with these pictures to make sense of, and they're not marked. They're not marked, so you just have to match up. Like, okay, this is that cedar tree again at a different angle, and why am I looking at this huge log, like you said with that campfire?
That's the log right there.
What is
right?
this? Yep. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And they were
so
found
the bodies
right
have been
there,
removed.
Right there. They were found right in that area. Okay. Wow.
Right in there.
That's crazy.
Right. I want to talk about, I want to say this while it popped in my head, just back to the tent itself. We did talk about the storage area having that set of skis marking the area. In the tent itself, in addition to finding it fairly orderly and everything like that, they did find a cut up ski pole where the top of the ski, now these ski poles were bamboo, where the top of the ski pole, and there's no picture of it, but they're saying that it's described as the top of the ski pole is cut off and there's a notch cut in the remaining part of the ski pole. And that is another odd detail to this mystery. They each only had one set of skis, one set of ski poles. Why is one cut up and left lying on top of everything? And that's the way it's described, lying on top of everything.
Maybe kindling or something like that.
I'm sorry?
Maybe it was like kindling for a bigger fire. Weren't they cutting parts off of it?
Something like that.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to explain something like that.
It is, especially with a piece of equipment they don't have any replacement for. And then I thought about that some more, and I saw a suggestion once that said maybe somebody used it to kind of prop up the inside of the tent. And then I thought, well, maybe it was actually a part of the tent. And Yuri Yudin wouldn't necessarily know that because he hadn't been with them camping yet. But it is a detail that comes up in discussions. Why did they cut up their own ski pole? So I did want to mention that back with the tent thing, but we'll.
What was one of the theories of why they would do that?
Of the ski pole?
Yeah.
One of the theories. Well, there's several. One theory is that the group was in the tent and afraid and cut little incisions in the tent to look out and cut up a ski pole to use it as a weapon. Another theory was that it was actually used to prop the tent up. But again, no explanation for why somebody would do that with their own ski pole. And with the tent itself, we did show it hanging in the search rescue center. The the cuts themselves, the tent itself was taken in for a microscopic observation, and they did determine that the cuts did come from the inside of the tent, that they were slashes. It wasn't like a slash and then you rip the tent open trying to get out. It was one long, clean slash, and that there were several marks inside the tent where a knife had tried to penetrate the canvas and hadn't succeeded. So,
but they're trying to get out, is what it appeared. Like they're trying to get out, though, right? You're saying from inside, right?
From inside. So that's something people say. You know, they were trying to cut their way out of the tent to escape.
And that would mean that the entrance to the tent was blocked or something, too, right?
Exactly. And as we saw with that picture, it wasn't not blocked to the degree where they couldn't get out. Plus, it was partially open. So, and just one side of the tent had those big, long slashes in it.
Is there only one entrance to a tent, or is there one on the other side, too? Or
there's another entrance, but they did use that to vent the stove. So the pipe and that stove pipe would stick out the back. So they tended to just use that one entrance, but it was basically the same on both sides.
But all 8 of them slept in the tent, or 9 of them at the same time, right?
Yes.
So
well, excuse me. They would assign people overnight duty to watch the stove.
Okay, but they were all in the tent.
Yes.
So maybe it could be that, you know, they panicked to try to get out, and some people cut it to get out quick because they couldn't get out or something. You know, it doesn't seem like that, though, because it seems like it would only take a mere 10 seconds for everybody to get out if they wanted to.
Get out. And they were experienced, but under a panic situation, we will, the orderliness of the tent, and we do talk about that in later chapters too, but the orderliness, the fact that the crackers were intact, that bread was out like they were making a sandwich, the cup of cocoa wasn't tipped over, it was just frozen. Things were still in nice, neat piles.
Wow.
Just doesn't lend itself to a chaotic panic situation, especially if you have people slashing trying to get out of the tent. Yeah. So it's interesting. We'll definitely talk more about that in our later chapters as we get into the theories. But I did want to bring up that ski pole and the cuts in the tent itself as we continue.
Yeah. So right now, I guess on the map, we're at the cedar tree. George and Yuri were the first 2 on there. But, I mean, from the tent going down, you've got, you know, Zena,
these other 3,
Rustum, Igor, and then everybody else is sort of down here. And what about the snow den? What's the snow den right there?
The snow den is an area. It's also called a platform. It's just an area near where they found those last 4 bodies. But we'll let's see.
I'm just going back through the order. Like we just showed the map, and this is them searching again.
Sure. So the next body, after the cedar area, they discovered Zena. Go back to this.
I think this is Zena right here.
George and Yuri, and then around the same time. All right. So the searchers that were following the footprints down into the wooded area, down into the area that ended up kind of leading up to the cedar area, but this is different searchers. They discovered a flashlight a third of a mile from the Dyatlov campsite. So now we have a flashlight that was discovered on top of the tent that was not turned on. It was in the off position, but when they turned it on, it worked. So now this is another flashlight that was found a third of a mile away from the campsite. It was in the on position, but the batteries were burned out. So this is it was found along the way of the footprints. This flashlight was discovered. So as the searchers, they found the flashlight, they continued to follow the footprints into the woods, the prints disappeared, but as they continued, they found Xena. And her body is a half mile from the campsite, and actually the halfway point between the campsite and the cedar area. And that's her, yes. She was wearing a shirt, coat, leggings, ski pants. She had socks, and they do say felted boots on her feet. And it's noted that there was blood on her back from a deep abrasion. We will go into that in the autopsies too. Next, they found Igor. He is a little further now. They keep following the footprints, which there weren't any anymore, but walking away from Xena towards the cedar area is Igor. He's he's 3/4 of a mile away from the campsite. And his body position, he was laying on his back with his head right. Yes, this is Igor. Now, that bit sticking out is his arms, and they're actually almost connected at the wrist. I mean, their fists. His fists are almost touching. He's actually got his arm wrapped around that tree, and we'll see that in the next pictures of him too.
Okay.
So there's Igor, and then, like I said, his hands are kind of clasped in that in front of his chest with his elbows sticking out, and then his left elbow is actually actually around that tree branch.
That's crazy. It's almost like he's trying to not be blown away or something, you know?
Right.
You know, like you get your arm around there and you're just holding on. Yeah, it's wild.
One thing with this, and you know, we do know that the death, the autopsies do say that the manner of death is freezing with some of these. But one thing I was thinking with this is they're all so far stretched out, like, and I'm not a doctor or anything at all. I just thought that maybe, you know, if you're freezing, when you're cold, you kind of huddle yourself into a ball and try to keep your core temperature warm, try to keep warm that way, kind of huddle up. But so far, and we'll see it when we see Rustum next, everybody's kind of laid out flat. Yes. So there's Rustum. He was found on March 5th. And he is between, not quite halfway, but he's between Xena and Igor. But they did find him later. In the search. One thing that other researchers bring up when they look at the picture of Rustum is how his hat's kind of just placed on his head. When we start talking about high winds and stuff, people like to point out that the way his hat is, it seems like it'd blow away. And that's just, you know, guesses really, but that's something that comes up in discussions.
I mean, it could have also been when they were digging, they found him and dug out, it sort of pulled his hat off his head a little bit.
And then just kind of plopped it back on there.
Yeah, so it's hard to make anything out of
it is,
because they've already cleared out
picture.
The snow. They would have found him in 2 minutes had it looked like this when they were walking by. They must have probably did a probe stick or something and felt
they
something.
did. For this first part of the search, these first 5, they were using ski poles in the immediate aftermath of finding the tent. They used ski poles and they were jabbing it into the snow, and that's how they found some of these bodies.
And there they are, right? Isn't that what they're doing right there, kind of? Or?
Yes, what they did, this is later, this is in May. They did continue the search because they know they're still missing 4 people. And so what they're using now is avalanche probes. And these avalanche probes were about 10 foot long, but they still didn't reach the bottom in some places, the way the snow drifts in some of the valleys and stuff like that. They kept expanding their search kind of from the tent and then around the cedar area, and this is them using avalanche probes. It kind of shows how deep the snow was that they were trying to search in. So this next picture, what happened is as the snow melted, the searchers started seeing these broken trees. And I mentioned that with the cedar area, that when they first found Yuri and George, they observed that there were tree tops were broken off, tree branches were broken off, but there wasn't really a rhyme or reason because they were green. Anybody who was experienced with making a fire would know that's not the type of wood that would be useful for that. So in this picture, we're looking at some broken trees. Off on the right, we see a tree kind of hacked up. So what they did is they started, as the snow melted, they started kind of following this trail of broken trees, and it led outside of the cedar area to the area where they did eventually. Now here's clothes. Clothes started being revealed as the snow melted. So they're following the broken branches trail. They found a pair of black cotton sweatpants, but when they picked it up and looked at it, one of the legs of the sweatpants had been cut off. So they're looking at like half a set of sweatpants. And later, kind of in the same area, they found half of a woman's sweater, which was later identified to be Luda's, but again, half had been cut in half. And they're like, why are we finding half pieces of clothing? So they continued following this trail of clothing and broken branches and ended up in this. This is called a ravine. This is where, or it's called a ravine in the documents. This is where the last 4 bodies are going to be found. This area.
Excuse me, are these footprints of, I'm not sure why we're getting that weird sound, but these are people all walking in a certain direction in a line trying to find bodies, right?
Yes, jabbing probes down in there. This area, due to the way it's situated, had drifted so much that even those 10-foot probes weren't doing the job. They couldn't reach that far. So what they started to do is dig exploratory holes. Now here they're taking a picture of that area that's like the reverse. So we're standing in that field we were looking in and looking out now.
Yeah, that could actually be the photo that was taken.
Right.
I mean, somebody's taking a picture of them taking the picture.
Right. Right.
I guess. Right. Yeah.
Yes. So in this area, again, the kind of the broken branches led this way. The avalanche probes weren't working, so they started digging a hole. And in the hole, they took one of the cadaver dogs alerted. So they dug another hole and they found this snow den. Now the snow den is, again, one of those topics that has a lot of theories, a lot of conversations around it. It's a pile of branches, some of the branches from some of those broken trees and everything, the trail they're following, and then those half pieces of clothing. So the other half of the sweater is in one of those corners. The other half of the sweatpants is in one of those corners. And then full pieces of clothing are in the other 2 corners of this snow den.
That's just crazy. You know, I've watched, you know, I'm not a survivalist or anything, but you watch these shows and it seems like they put down branches and so forth to have a layer between you and the ground or snow or something like that to preserve
and
heat.
And it's 4, and there's 4 people missing. It just all, you know, I mean, it's just such an oddity. Yet we have to remember they didn't have, you know, or if there was an axe, they never found one. Luda was not dressed at all. Now, I mean, she was more in those light pants, light shirt, sweater type thing, no shoes. Simon and Nicholas were completely clothed, like in their hiking gear. I mean, they were in heavy coats, heavy pants, their hiking boots. I mean, they were all geared up, hats. And Alexander was kind of partial. He didn't have boots on. But anyway, so those are the last 4 that we're looking for. They found this snow den. And again, there's so many discussions around this snow den.
On this shot right here, these 4 items are for 4 different people? Is that what you're saying?
They're Luda's sweater. The pants are, let me see. I don't have a note of who the pants belong to. But the other leg of the sweatpants. So half the sweatpants are there. The other half of Luda's sweater, a pair of pants, and a shirt.
So the other,
I
the
don't have
half of
identities.
the half of the pants of, I can't remember if it was George or whoever, but we got their leg burned. The other half is here.
No, because the leg burn pants are on Luda.
Oh, yeah. See,
So it
that's
might be
just
another set of pants. Because,
that's
yeah, I
crazy though.
know.
I mean, it's crazy
Yeah,
how all the clothes is moving around on different people though.
exactly. And then thinking, trying to put the pieces together. Like, so we've cut the clothes off George and Yuri. We know they died before at least Luda because she's wearing some of their clothing. And the four have moved and built this snow den, yet they've moved away from an operational campfire, a really good area. In fact, the searchers found that area thinking, hey, what a great area for a campfire and a campsite, and then moved,
Yeah. Did they
you
build
know,
this though? They must have built this during the melee. The stuff that was going on,
and
right?
that's up for, yes, and that's one of the discussions. If they built it, they didn't have an axe, did they? And George's knife is back in the cedar area. Um, did they, uh, well, that's just up for, breaking off
But this is
branches as
part of
they
it, right?
went.
This wall is part of it, right? The way that's.
Well, that's snowdrift. So
Oh.
it's actually been determined that the snow den itself may have actually been more at ground level because the snow drifted
Mm.
that deep into that area.
Yeah. So the thing is, one of the you hear people say that maybe they were all delusional and everything. But the thing is how do you have if you're that delusional, you wouldn't have been able to sit there and make a nice like a snow den. It looked like it actually went out, gathered some branches, put them in there, and built a snow den. That shows a level of pretty clear thinking,
Mm-hmm.
don't you think? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
so anyway.
yeah. I mean, something, and like I said, well, they say it would have even maybe been at ground level. Others suggest that maybe they dug down. There's been no indication that there's been a shovel or anything to dig. What this is just after it thawed, you kind of get an idea of the branches and the clothing. They just left it, and as the
Mm-hmm.
snow den thawed, it popped back up. All those branches kind of popped back up. They weren't smashed down anymore. This is the hole where they found the last four bodies. And when they dug that exploratory hole and the cadaver dog alerted, they dug a hole and fit it. Yeah, this is the exploratory hole where the cadaver dog alerted. So they knew something was nearby. Then they dug a hole and found that snow den. And then they were able to find the bodies. Now, here they're standing in the drift of snow, and where those three men are kind of in a hole, behind them is that stream, and the last four bodies were in there. So in this picture, we're looking at the snow den right there where your mouse is.
Yeah, right there.
Yes, yep, perfect. The bodies are in that hole, which when they remove the bodies, it'll be kind of dug out more. And then the exploratory hole is right there. So it kind of shows that, well, one of the theories states that the Luda and Simon, who had crushed and broken ribs, fell down the ravine,
Mm-hmm.
and the ribs were crushed. And we're just not seeing, between the snowdrift and everything, how that would have been a scenario to
Yeah, I mean
fall.
these are crazy shots. There was like this little creek going down in the ravine,
Yes.
right?
And you see it in that picture of the field where we were looking at the footsteps and it
Mm-hmm.
was marked with skis. You kind of see the indent where the creek is.
Yeah, you can even see it on. It might even just be runoff from the mountain, but I'm actually sure that's what it is. But so you let's see. And which four were found? There's a snow den. Was it these four that were found in the water?
Yes.
So wouldn't they be? They'd probably be more down in this area, right? And
Yes. It says that they were
it could be right over here, though. There's a little kind of a.
about 200 feet, broken branches to a field that was 200 feet from the cedar. I don't have a direction noted in there.
Oh, okay, so definitely. Let's see. Hold on. Let me do 200 feet from the cedar. That's assuming the cedar's exactly where, you know.
Right.
All right, so here's
right.
200 feet. You know, so, but here's the thing: is it looks like there's this runoff area here. I don't know if there's runoff right there, but you know, either way, they were found. They're all just in this area here. It's hard. It was 1959. They didn't have GPS coordinates.
No, they hand drew maps. There's a lot of hand drawn maps.
Yeah.
And the estimates of distance and these pictures. So
that one's
this
just
is
creepy.
Luda.
That's just creepy. So that's how she was found, like that, right?
Yeah, she was found like that.
Wow.
They did, after the dog alerted and they were digging that other hole, found the snow den, they still used the avalanche probes, and they actually caught Luda with an avalanche probe. And when they yanked it up, they realized they had hit a body. So they dug down in that area where we saw those 3 men standing, so over the very edge of that big snowdrift. And this is how they found Luda. And she is so close. The other 3 are almost right at her head.
But this is running water right here, right?
That's running water. Yep, she's laying in running water.
And isn't she the one that has one of the
yes.
What is it on her leg though? Or is it on her?
It's kind of wrapped around her. I'll look at and make
crazy.
sure I.
It's almost like was it George she got that from?
Yes, the burned leg.
Like it was on fire, and it just felt like, oh God, I'm gonna wrap this around me because it's so warm. You know, you just rip it off and you use it almost like as a heater because you're so cold. And I just think, man, it just seemed like they were so cold. It's just.
Oh yeah, freezing. So what I have noted in her autopsy, and it was the coroner actually noted exactly as he removed clothes, dark cotton pants with an elastic belt. The pants are ragged, torn, and burned. So we're saying that she's wearing them. So that's actually the pants she's wearing.
But he still had one of them. Oh, maybe that was an inner pant that we still saw, because he had one leg had a white, it could have been like those, what do you call those, long johns type?
No, yes. They still had long johns on.
Yeah, my Blue's about ready to start barking here. Blue, no barking. All right.
Blue can join in.
Come on, Blue.
Happy little guy.
Well, he's been on my lap this whole time because they were about to start wrestling. Okay, but let's see. Yeah, so he had like long johns on. He had on his right leg, and then they ripped. Okay.
Right.
But the left leg they were missing, but there might have been an outer pair of pants that were also burned. So he probably tore those off. His left leg got burned because his pants caught on fire. He tore those off, and then she came by, and then she put them on because at least they were pants.
Something else to have on.
Right, and they were and the fire probably went out at that point when she found him, and she was able to slip them on. That's crazy. But see, it takes to be really delusional and everything. It would be so hard to get pants on in those conditions. I mean,
they had to just be so cold, just grasping at everything. But then we don't have an explanation for cutting her sweater in half. Now here's the last 3 bodies. They had to remove Luda's body to even be able to dig into and around to get the guys due to where they were located. So she's been removed.
So was she right there to the left, like right here?
Right in there.
Because the water is coming down right there. It looks similar.
I did try to put something together that might be coming up, but yes. So the way it was described. Oh, that's her. That's them removing her. They did remove her that day because they had to do that to see the other 3.
Okay, and then
so that's them removing.
Look how crazy that is, everybody. Man.
Yeah. So here is to kind of help everybody get oriented with this. We see the arm kind of towards the bottom, and then the other arm. That's Nicholas. You can't see his head. The way his jacket has gotten caught in the water current. So you see his 2 arms, and then kind of his head and jacket. You know, his jacket's full of water, and his head is
Isn't
underwater.
his head right? Isn't his head like right there though, or is that not it?
I didn't.
No, that would.
I kind of had a few different guesses with it.
Probably not, because look, if that's his shoulder, that the neck would be about 2 feet long. So you're saying that's a shoulder right there, or what are we looking at right there?
That's an arm.
And then is that the shoulder area right here?
I would think so, yeah. So like I was saying, it looks like his coat was kind of caught and, get it an envelope type thing around him or something.
Well, what's this right here?
That's his other hand. He's wearing 2 watches. They're both stopped, so we don't know what time they were set on, but that's him wearing 2 watches.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, you can definitely see that.
And when you look down at his other arm, I didn't really point this out, but see that oval? There's kind of an oval thing down where maybe his elbow would be. That oval right there. Yeah. I just thought, that's an unusual shape, but that could be ice or just kind of the way he's frozen or something like that. But yes, it is noted that he was wearing 2 watches. So that's Nicholas. Right next to him is Simon. Simon will see it because we will see the pictures of these bodies. He is missing his eyes.
Isn't he missing an eye too?
Yes, and that's Alexander. So they had Luda's body, removed it, and then there's Nicholas, Simon, and Alexander, and just laying in a row like that, almost like as the snow, as it warmed up, the snow melted, and they just happened to end up in that. It's
almost
stream.
Like they all chose a, hey, let's go right here, let's dump into here, and then it turned out it was some water, and then they got frozen almost immediately. Water is really the last thing in the world you want to be in when
it's so destructive.
When it's really cold too, like that, because there's no way to get warm again after that. And so it's strange that they're all in the exact spot. So it feels like it was an area that was covered with snow, just like it was when the searchers tried to find them. They went down into it and then sunk through and broke through into, because there was less snow at the time. And then they broke through, and then they went into the water, and they just couldn't get out of it. Something like that. I mean, that's just a thought. I don't know. Are you still there?
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm nodding. I'm sorry. I forgot I needed to say something because I'm nodding enthusiastically. I'm sorry. Yes. And it's really odd the way their bodies are all just kind of lined up like that and stuff. I think the previous picture, what I did is I put those 2 pictures together to kind of show where Luda was. But so Luda and then them and, oh no, I'm sorry, not the previous picture. Where are we at?
No, I think this is when they've pulled all the bodies out.
Oh, yes, pulling all the bodies out.
And yes. Right here.
So these are the 3 guys, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're taking out Nicholas, Simon, and Alexander.
What a creepy thing to have to do to be these guys,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And to know that they'd been, frozen, were thawing, and were in running water. So now you have the skin slipping a little bit. This picture is of Luda and Nicholas. That's Nicholas at the bottom and Luda at the top. And they have her shirt pulled up to show where the Avalanche probe hit her in the back. Yeah, so they wanted to show that for the autopsy. And
I can't even make out what. I mean, I can tell that this is her legs, I would think, and then.
And she's kind of in a bag. They've got a bag around her feet, and it's white. So you see, like they're putting her in a body bag. So that's her feet are in there, and then you've got her back, and then the shirt's lifted up just a bit, and you have that mark there showing where the avalanche probe is. She's on her stomach. This is Simon and Alexander. Simon's at the bottom of this picture. He was found with a camera
right there.
Around his neck. And his camera was found in the tent. So this camera brings up a lot of interesting discussions. Since he was found in water, the film wouldn't have been recoverable. An interesting note with Simon is there in his left hand is a notebook. And one of the searchers made a note of that. He said, so Simon has a notebook in his left hand and a pencil in his right hand. but he's frostbitten. What's he writing or why?
Right here? Are you talking about right here? This guy?
Yes.
How can you? I don't see. Well, I guess. I mean, if that's just in the notes. I don't see a notebook. Do you see one or?
Yes, down in his. You can kind of make out the paper or something in his hand, right? Kind of down in there. This is a little bit different than his pants.
But he literally had a pencil in his right hand and a. God, that is just.
And a notebook in his left, and that really stuck with the searchers. They brought that up a few times. Why? Yeah, he's frostbitten. He's freezing. What is he writing? How is he writing?
I mean, you could say, well, he was trying to write a last note to somebody, but really, while you're in the water trying to live, it just doesn't make any sense. And it's weird, just the whole. So you're saying that this camera here was found somewhere else too?
His camera was found in the tent. This camera is an unknown camera.
Oh, interesting.
Or according to, again, Yuri Yudin, he had to go by memory with a lot of things, but they did find Simon's camera. If Simon had a second camera, Yuri wasn't aware of it. And this one was found. Or, maybe it's just a camera case. Maybe there's not even a camera.
That just makes no sense to have a pencil in one hand, a notebook pad.
No, it's almost like he was posed. I mean, that's the Stacy thing. That's not in the notes anywhere. But I did want to mention that he was found with a pencil in one hand and a notebook in the other. And the searchers thought that was really strange under the circumstances.
Yeah, well, so it's beyond strange. It's, and this is after they've been moved around. We don't know if was his were his hands just like this when he was pulled out of the water, or? Well,
when we're looking at the pictures of them pulling them out, there is a picture that looks like he's one of the rescuers is right there. That one that you just go back again. So here you see that rescuer, the tall, dark-haired guy, facing off to the left. Now, in his hand, it looks like he's trying to hold something. That doesn't make sense because the body's, I don't know. I was thinking maybe that was showing it, but that's not.
Yeah, so it's hard to say. I mean, I can buy that there was a pencil and a notebook in his hands, but it's hard to say for sure if his hands were exactly like that, just like this.
Is he still frozen? Yeah, is he still frozen in this picture?
And if he's frozen, yes, then it would have stayed like that. What's this right here? Is that anything? Looks like
not that I've noted anywhere. Not that I've seen noted anywhere.
Kind of looked like a pencil.
I'm not sure what that is.
Look like a golf pencil because it's short ones,
Oh, a little tiny one, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's you went through everybody. Is there anything else you want to say about the bodies?
The bodies.
Pretty crazy so far.
Yeah. It really spooked the searchers when they started finding people without their eyes, and that's a theory that while they're in running water, a small animal maybe ran through and ate the soft parts of their skin. Luda was found without a tongue. Again, that goes into that same theory, and we will cover all of that in the autopsies, the missing eyes and stuff like that. I think we hit all the highlights. Is there any big questions coming up?
Well, I think we're going to have a question and answer show. I think the next episode is going to be the autopsy.
And that's going to be a pretty big one.
So that might take up the whole show, and then maybe you can do unusual clues, and then we'll go right into the theories on a fourth show.
Yeah.
And then we can even open the lines up and people can call and ask you questions. How about that?
That would be great. I love doing that. I always learn something new, like even, today, well, both shows with you, Gray. I learned something new. It's fascinating. And each topic just seems to spread out its own new questions. And other answers and new directions to look at things. And, it just goes all sorts of different directions. So yes, I would love that. I love discussing this and hearing everybody's points of view. I certainly don't know all the answers. My intention with this book was to say, hey, this is what's in the original investigative reports. This is, we go line by line in the I went line by line in the autopsies. These are the injuries that have been noted. These are the clothes they're wearing. And if we can match, like I said, Luda, we know she was wearing a pair of pants that had burns on them and things like that. So that was my intention with this book. And it's just a fascinating, sad mystery.
It's really
and
crazy.
I learned something new.
I think there's a lot of people will be interested to know that the stove wasn't even used that night. So that's interesting.
Right.
But
right.
So
yes, a lot of.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just a lot of theories come out of things like that, and it's not from anybody except just not realizing these things. These are the details that are really interesting to find out about and read about in those original reports, especially the first witnesses on the scene.
Yeah. Well, listen, that was awesome. Another great episode. Everybody was really interested, I could tell in the chat there. So
that's wonderful.
So that was Stacy Galloway, everybody, episode or part 2 that we just covered, and don't forget to get her book on Amazon. She never asks me to do this, by the way, everybody. I'm just telling you. Okay.
You're so kind, Gray. You really are, and you make this so easy to do.
Yeah.
I'm really nervous, and you make this so easy, like just a conversation. And
yeah, cool.
Fantastic. It's
well,
fantastic.
The link is in the description, but it's called The Death of Nine, or I think just Death of Nine, the Dyatlov Pass Mystery.
Yes.
And you don't have your name on there because you use
I used a pen name. I wrote a lot of fiction under Stacy Galloway, and this was important to me to have it be not a completely nonfiction, and I chose to write it under Lawton Anderson to keep it separated from my fiction writings. So. All
right. Well, thank you very much, and probably sometime next week we'll do part 3, and that one will be the autopsies, which are even crazier than any of the stuff that you've seen so far, right?
Right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gray. This has been fantastic.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So, as I always say, until next time, be safe out there.